I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Josef Šachta, who is the co-founder and CEO of Sharry Europe. And Josef is the CEO and co-founder of Sharry, which is a property technology company. And he's focusing on the company's development and strategy. But unlike and in contrast to the majority of software developers, Josef is trained in law and journalism. Before founding Sharry, he started a company called CityBee. It's a leisure and lifestyle portal and first-floor creative agency. His passion is communication in all forms, and his current interest is in the communication between a building and the people inside. Josef and his team created a concept of friendly buildings, defining a synergy between the real and digital asset. And he's going to be talking to you today about integrating smart solution platforms. Josef, thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. So it's quite tough to follow Matthew after his presentation, but I think that it's actually quite connected because after the first half of the day, which was just very supportive to integration, now we come with a little bit more skeptical presentations, even if I am actually integrator. So I hope that this presentation can maybe a little bit change how you are thinking about integration. But please let me introduce very briefly our company. We are providing software platform for office building, and I will be talking just about office building today. And we basically integrate four very typical needs of each office buildings. We integrate access control system, parking systems, guest management, and tenant engagement app. As you can see, all these functions are actually based on the database of users in comparison to BMS and all this second half of software in the building, I would say. Our software is currently running in 26 buildings in 7 countries, including United States and South Africa, which is actually a very promising market, I think, like Africa in general. And maybe our biggest achievement is creating of Connected by Skanska, which is operating system used by Skanska, surprisingly, in all their buildings in Central European district. This solution Connected by Skanska is based on our Sharry platform, so it's very similar to what we provide as our own product, Sharry Workplace. So, as you could see today many times, as Mrs. Tomlinson from Memory already showed us as well, there are hundreds of companies in Europe and around the world providing tens of technologies for smart buildings. I just used this map to demonstrate it. It's from Unisu.com. I hope that it doesn't matter that I use their map. And quite naturally, if you see the number of technologies which could be used in the buildings, from the words integration and platform became the most frequently words in PropTech world. And they're a little bit like a Bible. I would say that integration is definitely the toughest part of PropTech and of all these things in smart buildings. And we decided to do that, and I can say that I met a lot of problems Matthew was talking about, and even some others. But it's quite usual and it's understandable that you need to integrate these things in the buildings. So because it like absolutely makes sense that if you have one building that you can manage it, you can manage all software and all technologies on one place. You know, it's actually like still in the buildings today you can see that in this control room they have like 4 computers for 4 different systems, but it's definitely not what we want. So basically the integration could be based on 3 things, I think, that you are creating one interface for occupiers, or you are creating one administration interface for managers of the building, or you just want the systems talk to each other. But I'm always comparing the platform for building to the app for example, Tesla car. If you have a Tesla car, you want to keep just one app to control for you to find the car in the parking area or to keyless starting of the car. You don't want two separated apps for that. So it's natural that if you have one real thing, one real object which is building, you want just one software to it. I think that it's quite nice demonstration of this are all these fancy promotion videos you can see from the companies like we are, and very often the happy end is that you can even order the coffee by your app. But I'm always wondering who is actually replacing the cups there. But it's almost always there, as you can notice. I think that what's important to say is that integration is really not the Pokemon Go play, that it's not about, okay, let's integrate everything. It's very often what our clients want, especially if they are CEOs of the companies, for example. They are just saying, okay, let's integrate everything. And I don't think that it's a good approach, and I will try to explain. So, how to implement a real value-added integration? I think that you should start with a small feasibility study, and this feasibility study should have 5 parts. First, technology, but I don't want to talk a lot about it here. I would say, in my opinion, that it's actually the easiest part. It's tricky. It has a lot of problems which needed to be solved, but all companies are now really focused on it. Everybody is thinking about it, and I think that in the end, everything is possible. It's not the biggest issue, I think. What's quite important and very often forgotten is legal, legal perspective of integration. As also was already mentioned today, GDPR is, for example, a big thing, and you need to, if you integrate two systems and they change personal data, you need to consider who is actually administrator, who is the controller of the data, who is responsible for them, who is going to protect them. You need to consider all these agreements. And it's not easy. And in general, like the legal concept of integration, it's difficult because usually you have the number of vendors, and all of them are just vendors to the developer or to the landlord. There is not like subcontractor chain, which makes much bigger sense in the perspective of law. So so it can be difficult, and you just need to think about it. Responsibility is just not the thing of legal, but it's also like who will be responsible for the operation. I really appreciate the presentation of TPEX today, because I think that this is really a big issue of smart buildings, that we have smart buildings, we have smart solutions, but we are still waiting for smart property management, I think. And everybody who is working in this area is super important for business of all us here. And so I really appreciate that. You need to ask who's going to be responsible when something doesn't work in the building, because it's quite difficult to determine if it's the mistake of the vendor, of the access control system, of the integrator, who is responsible for that, and also who is responsible for example, creating content. I like that a lot of our clients are telling us, okay, we want the app because we want to boost community, but no mobile app will boost your community. The content of the app could boost the community. And who's going to be responsible for this content? Who's going to manage that? It's always necessary to ask first. Of course, cost is a big issue. I like the example that some of our clients are asking us, okay, we want to order food via your app, or we want to be navigated to the work. So basically, I'm telling them, you want us to create like new delivery hero or new Google Maps. And these companies, they have like hundreds of developers for that. And you want us like just do it as a part of the solution, like something small, which is not so. So I'm always telling them, okay, it's super expensive to create something like that, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to be competitor of something what works. And the last thing, but definitely not the least, is user experience. As you can see here, even some big players, they decided to separate their apps. You know, Facebook separated the Messenger from their main application. It's the same about Uber and Uber Eats, and they do that because they understood that the more functions you have, the worse is user experience. It's like that, you know. If of course that we are trying to combine more functions together, but always you need to consider user experience. And this is just two things like that against integration nowadays. That like 10 years ago, the open space was the winner of how the workplace should look like. And today, the most popular parts of open spaces are these cells where you can be by yourself. And also in the politics, you can see some tendencies against integration, but we are not happy for that. So I want to say that we are integrators, so we fight for integrations. But you need always consider what's the reason for integration, what's the purpose. And I try just to show some combinations which definitely make sense. So for example, if you have sensors in your building, it's definitely necessary to keep information from all of these sensors on one administration interface, on one dashboard, because all these informations together create some added value. The same if you want to display all amenities inside the building, I would suggest keep inside the buildings, because you know sometimes it's also quite mess that clients are putting together like all three layers of building, I would say, like surrounding of the building, and the fit out of the tenant. But actually they can control just this middle layer, you know, just these common spaces in the building. So I would suggest to keep the amenities which are inside the building, not to try to compete with Zomato and so on. And definitely, again, it makes sense to combine them together in one app. Or for example, workplace environment. If you come to the meeting room, it's quite useful that you can on one place change the light, change the temperature, turn on the projector, and so on. And this is what we do in Sharry. And I would like to clarify why we believe in combination of these four things. We think that because, as you could see in the start, we are trying to create friendly buildings for a flexible world. So we think that if you are managing tenants in your building, that probably you should manage all their permissions on one place. So if you have a new company, a new tenant, or just one new employee, you can grant him all permissions on one place. So you can grant him the parking lot, the permissions to access and when and where, the permission to invite guests, the permission to book some resources in the building, and so on. But the best example from the perspective of user, I think, it's the visitor experience. If you want in our system invite a guest, you can in one step you can enable the guest to enter the garage, and via license plate recognition, you can book the parking spot for him or her. You can enable the access into the building via QR code, and you can even greet the guest on the screen, for example. So actually almost all our functions are in one use case, and this is what makes sense, you know, to find the use case where you combine all these systems together. And also where it's good that the users have their app, because when the guest is coming, they are notified via their app about that the guest is already coming to the building. In the end, I would like to emphasize two things which I would like you to take away. First, I said already that we have smart buildings, but we definitely need smart property management. And I am really curious, and I wonder when these big companies like CBRE, JLL, Cushman & Wakefield, and so on, and they will really start to promote and to provide this kind of property management. They do that already. They have their departments for that. But I'm really expecting big changes in this. And the very last thing is that I would like to ask you really don't focus on number of integrations, but focus how to make your buildings more friendly. That's what I was trying to talk about. Thank you very much. Okay. Probably if you have any question, you can ask. Thank you very much.
Now, do we have any questions for Josef? Questions? Yes, right in the front. Here we go. See, we got stuff for you already. I was out greeting all the speakers that just came.
That's fine. Sorry.
Please.
You ready?
Yep.
Yeah, Antoine from Sharing Cloud. Just a comment more than a question. It's about what we call integration. I mean, integration can mean a lot of things, even for a single connection between two systems. And what I tend to say, is just a comment more than a question again, is I often say that it's 10 times harder to do a bi-directional integration rather than a single-way integration between two systems. And often people, when they think about integration, they think that all the information, all the data, all the referential data, all the real-time data will be exchanged between the two systems. So we also need to define precisely what an integration is between two applications. My point.
I definitely agree, but in general, I think that these 5 things which I mentioned as you need to consider, it's actually for all kinds of integrations. You're absolutely right that if it's just single-way integration, it's much easier and like the concerts are lower, but still you need to consider it, I think. It looks like no
questions.
No other question.
Just to add to that, the integration is such an important, concept. But again, like smart building, it means different things in different situations. So it's very important to integrate. It's a nice little phrase you can hold on to, but it's different from case to case. Questions or observations? Anything else? Because Josef is an expert in these platforms, and this is your chance. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
I will
but
stay
you'll be
here,
around.
so if you will have any question, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you,
Thank you
Josef, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye
much.
bye.